Hello folks! When we're talking about going to historical places, the furthest back in history we can really go is only around 400 years or so. That's only if you want to talk about the European settlement. As far as Native American historical sites, well, they could go back thousands of years here on the North American continent. Depending on where you are, you can find different places from different periods of time. It doesn't have to start at beginning of the 1600s or so. What we're looking at is one of these Native American mounds. And we're still here in Ohio, southeast Ohio. We're no longer in the south. We're in sort of, I guess you could still call this the Midwest, but it's more culturally Appalachian. And this mound is right here in Marietta, Ohio. This was built 1,000 years or so, give and take a good 500, 600 years on both sides. We're not exactly sure how old this mound is, but it was built a long, long time ago, hundreds of years before the first European stepped foot on this North American continent. And as you can see, it doesn't really go along with the terrain of everything else. Although this area is pretty hilly and mountainous, a mound like this, of this size, doesn't exactly represent what a hill is like here in Ohio. Like, you won't normally find a small mound like this jutting out of the land. This is definitely one of those Native American contributions to their area. Marietta used to be one of those ancient settlements by one of those mound builders' cultures. And all over the Midwest you can find mounds like these of varying sizes. The most notable one is Cahokia, right outside of St. Louis in southern Illinois. About 2,000 years ago, the Hopewell mound builders culture here in the Ohio area, among other states, built this little mound. So let's say you decided to move to Marietta and resided in one of these houses. You could pass it every day, not knowing that at the center of this cemetery lies an ancient edifice spanned thousands of years into the past. And archaeologists all over this area are still trying to figure out the clues to the past before we really know of it. And for reasons I'll soon be telling you, Marietta, Ohio holds a huge amount of history, not just for southeast Ohio, not just for Ohio, but the entire northern region of the United States. So with that being said, let's begin our day here in Marietta, Ohio. So on my way to the downtown area here in Marietta, we find Marietta College, and it's just an ordinary small college. Nothing much, not going to go through it and describe what I feel about it. Most colleges in the US have their own little mascot, something the college can identify with during sporting events or meetups with other colleges. And what's the mascot for Marietta College? Why, that would be the Pioneers. And the Marietta College Pioneers are so fitting because it very much captures the history of this place. Anytime we can follow a brick road, I try to do it. Sort of captures the environment of the history and the culture of a given place. So on this brick road, let me tell you about why pioneers are so important to the city. Back before Ohio became a state, it was part of the Northwest Territory. Most land that was northwest of the Ohio River was all in one territory. Back in the day, over 200 years ago, much of this area was frontier land. The only part of the United States that was developed were the areas along the East Coast. So this was just a bunch of land America had, but didn't really develop. So the first waves of pioneers who went west, past the almighty Appalachian Mountains, found this area. The land was under French control leading up to the French and Indian War. After that, the British had it, and after we got our independence, we also got this land, the Northwest Territories, and settling around the Ohio River was the hot thing of the time. The thing that is so important about Marietta, though, was that this was the first permanent settlement in those Northwest Territories. So ultimately, This is the pioneer city. It was the first city to be settled and continually settled to this day in the state of Ohio. So if the Buckeye State, Ohio is near and dear to your heart and you want to know, if you ever had the question, what's the oldest city in Ohio? Well, that'd be Marietta, right here in the southeast region. From where does Ohio take its name? Why, it's the Ohio River, of course. It comes from the Seneca word meaning good or great river, and it sure is one. It's a major river of the United States, spanning from the highlands of Pennsylvania all the way down to where it converges with the Mississippi. In total, it spans several states, and it's a large reason of why the Midwest was developed in the first place. If you ignore the ducks flailing their wings and all that, you can see that the bank of this river is covered by these stones that are now overrun with all this grass and leaves. So that tells you that this dock was probably of some importance. Maybe boats were tied and docked on shore right here, and that's why they needed the stones. Maybe it was a place to congregate. This is a nice little area, and maybe in the first years of Marietta, these grounds were used. We've seen the Ohio River before in West Virginia when we went to Wheeling. This is the first time we get to see the Ohio River in Ohio. However, on the other side of this river, you're going to find states that are not Ohio. For example, this over there is West Virginia on the other side. Can anybody explain what these ducks are doing? I'm not a biologist, I don't know the habits of ducks and birds, but if anybody does know, I would love to know, because this is just strange, coming from someone who doesn't flap their arms all that much. But if you want to know why Ohio's southern border is all squiggly and twisty like that, well, there you go, it's the Ohio River doing all that. And it's mostly the case with other squiggly borders throughout the United States. So there's a big reason why the Ohio River was favored throughout American history, and this is exactly why. Not the duck, the ship over there. The Ohio River is one of those great American rivers that are mostly navigable by boat. So you could possibly take a boat or a ferry or whatever you use on the river, and you can go from one end of the Ohio River, say maybe Pennsylvania, all the way down to where it has that confluence with the Mississippi River. For that reason, you can facilitate trade so easily within Ohio and the Midwest. And since it connects to the Mississippi River, you could have crops grown here, goods manufactured here, and transport them from right here in rural Ohio all the way to another part of the country using boats like these. One thing the state of Ohio is terrific at is telling you what the history was behind everywhere you are in the state. I just saw that sign. I was confused where all the stones were and why they were there. And turns out this shore might have been used for shipbuilding because a big industry apparently was now shipbuilding in the area. So maybe 150, 200 years ago, you might have seen hard-working shipbuilders working on their prized possessions, the boats they were crafting. So as we see this river flow in a general southeastern direction, we can expect it to go over there in that direction towards the Mississippi River. But what's this? More water? Yeah, this is the tributary. Well, one of many, many tributaries of the Ohio River. This is the Muskingum River, and this connects the rural communities of eastern Ohio to the rest of the country through this Ohio River. So that's that for the water. Let's actually see the downtown of Marietta after postponing it for quite a few minutes now. Before we go, I gotta show you this. You You see that measuring stick, that giant tool? That's the amount of feet that this river can flood up to. And it says here that record floods in the last century or so. 58, 55, 45, 40 feet. If you compare that with that, yeah, these rivers could seriously get dangerous. All right, let's go to the city. Seems like this town has a lot going for itself. Nothing looks too dilapidated like an old, withering downtown. It seems nice with the colorful, preserved buildings of the past. Of course, there's always going to be trendy stuff in an effort to revitalize the economy, but for what it's worth, I like Marietta's downtown. Oh, this is so cool. This isn't some recent commemoration. This is from over a century ago, 1893, and it's commemorating the first pioneers who landed near this spot. April 7th, 1788. 1788? That's a long time ago, and a very long time ago for Ohio standards. One historic part of the Marietta area is just across the Muskingum River. It's called Harmar Village, and this shows, and just the environment, the history of this area. There's a rail train on display, even. Bridge closed. Well, that's a darn shame. I wanted to walk across this historic rail bridge. Looks kind of in disrepair. Maybe it wouldn't be safe. As Americans, civilians, military, those working for the state altogether came to this area, they settled Marietta and they developed a fort called Fort Harmar, and that's why this is the Harmar district. And they built this fort to protect themselves from what may lay beyond. Americans back then did not know whether they would encounter a hostile Native American tribe that they've never met, and so they built forts as they went west, just for that extra measure. And it seems like they couldn't have picked a better location to have this fort. Here at this confluence, if you think about it, if you can control the access point to both of these rivers, you can control all the trade that goes on within this area. So setting up a fort right here, it's not only good for economic purposes, but it's also good for militaristic purposes. So you can get all your armory supplies in place at once. But I think it's a perfect place to rest up and end this video. I am exhausted, not only from today, but almost 4 weeks of continuous non-stop travel. But I'm gonna try to make it work for the sake of the coverage project. And today was really fun. We got to explore Ohio's first settlement. I hope you liked that. Maybe I should explore the first settlements of other states too if I ever get to it. But this is Marietta, one of those hidden gems of the state of Ohio. You think of the state as the few cities you go to and maybe a couple like cultural farm areas, but that'll be it for Ohio. But here in southeast Ohio, where it's nothing but mountains and hills for miles and miles, Marietta, Ohio is not a bad place to rest up, have a good time, walk around, and just see the peaceful side of a small town here in Ohio. Maybe on the edge of it, because like I said, that is West Virginia over there. Hard to fathom, but that is West Virginia. It kind of makes sense. No wonder they would set this important city up to be one of those important integral places in the Northwest Territories. So coming to you from the confluence of the Muskingum and the Great Ohio River, looking at a decent view of West Virginia, the mountain state. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.